What does it mean to be perfect? Who gets to decide? Does it have to do with how we look, or act, or speak? What is perfect? This was going to be rhetorical, but maybe I'm just going to ask a little bit, what is perfect? What are some of this is not necessarily what you think it actually is, but what are some of the things in society that we say is perfect? What makes something perfect? What's that? I'm sorry. Egg? An egg is perfect? Okay. Wendy? Being skinny? Okay. Yeah, what are some of the other things that make things perfect? Being smart. No flaws. Anything else? There's no wrong, there's no wrong answers here. What are we doing? Being the same. Okay, cool. So keep those little, what do we want to think of them as? Little mosquitoes of yuck, of what is perfection floating around in your minds as we go through this. Over the last 5 years or so, we've been working on, within the congregation, we've been working on understanding and breaking down the language and attitude of white supremacy culture, of chipping away at its power in our systems and practices. And part of the personal journey for me has been tackling perfectionism. In my thinking mind, I believe that there is no such thing as perfect, that the glass is already broken, that outside of the sense that all life is part of a whole and that in our imperfection we are invited to learn and grow, make mistakes, and be vulnerable. And I work really hard to model that in my ministry and work. And to be vulnerable, this is very much still a growing place for me. Because remember, I said in my thinking and in my belief, but in my biases, in my gut reactions, in the old teachings in my heart, I struggle with an instinct that connects doing things perfectly with goodness and value, which is nonsense. I was rereading Dr. Tema Okun's article on characteristics of white supremacy culture and White Supremacy Culture Still Here, which was the update, which we used in our Widening the Circle classes last year and which I highly recommend. She reminds us to uncouple the ideas of excellence and perfection. And this is a reading from Dr. Okun. There is no relationship between perfectionism and excellence. Perfectionism is the belief that we can be perfect or perform perfectly. The question has to be asked, to who? Who decides what perfect is? Perfectionism is the conditioned belief and attitude that we can be perfect based on a standard or set of rules that we did not create and that we are led to believe will prove our value. Perfectionism is the conditioned belief and attitude that we can determine whether others are showing up as perfect and demand or expect that they do so. White supremacy culture uses perfectionism to preserve power and the status quo. As long as we're striving to be perfect according to someone else's rules, we have less energy and attention to question those rules and remember what is truly important. We can be perfectionist in our social justice circles when we assume or believe there is a perfect way to do something and we know what it is. When we look more closely at our own perfectionism, we see that the perfectionist tendency is always in service of our own power or the current power structure. We might be fighting power out in the world, but when we are perfectionist about how we do that, we preserve toxic power structure internally. Excellence has more potential to be defined by and for us. We can talk about what we think excellence is and hold ourselves and each other accountable to a shared and collectively defined standard of excellence. We can rock the boat with excellence. We can care for each other with excellence. We can write and lead and work and teach and cook with excellence. We can forgive with excellence. Excellence requires making and learning from mistakes. And she concludes, and here's the main point: we are already perfect. We are made perfect. We do not have to prove our perfection to anyone, even ourselves, no matter what our inner voices may be telling us. We may have lost touch with how perfect we are, and when we do, our perfectionism becomes a way to try and prove to ourselves and others that we are worthy. But we are already worthy. We are already invaluable. No proof necessary. What are the stories we tell as a culture and as individuals about perfection, value, and goodness or rightness? Let's start with a very low-stakes example. If there are folks here who have worked in restaurants, you can probably ace this question. It's about table settings. So I learned back in home economics class in junior high that the fork goes on the left of the plate because fork and left have 4 letters. That's how I could remember. And the spoon and knife go on the right of the plate, and they have 5 letters, just like the word right. At my house growing up, I think everything went on the same side with the napkin, but I genuinely don't remember because we just didn't worry about it. However, my father-in-law is living with us now, and he ran a ski lodge and B&B for years where he set a lot of tables. Emmett told me that there is a right way to face the knife. Who knows what way? Yes, in the back. The knife edge facing towards the plate. Yes. And I've always faced it blade out because that seemed more symmetrical to me, kind of like a triangle or something. But apparently it's supposed to face blade in, so when you pick up your knife and fork, you're ready to cut. So now when I'm setting the table, at least at Emmett's place, the knife faces with the blade in. And to be fair to Emmett, he sets the table most nights. Now, this is not something I am attached to, right? When left to our own devices, my husband Tad and I eat like teenagers, everything in one big bowl with a fork or a spoon, and we eat on the couch. But that's not our lives anymore. We're at the table with knives turned in the right direction. So all that said, I'm sure there are things that I am that attached to, that I do unconsciously in order to meet a standard of what is right and perfect set by upper-class white folks long, long ago. Think for a minute about the things in your home or your work that you would redo if someone was helping you and did the task differently than you would. Getting to the same end, but they do it differently, it looks a little different. What are those things that you would take the time to redo? Maybe you're attached to a certain way of doing something because it helps you. If you don't put your keys in the same place, you'll never find them again. Or maybe because there is a voice in the back of your head telling you that there's a particular way that things are supposed to be done. And what would happen if you let it go? Let it be different. Okay, let's consider some higher stakes examples than cutlery. What makes a body perfect? What are the assumptions and stories that we have about what a person should look like and do? What is perfection in our art and music? What is perfection in work and learning? When you start to spend some time in these questions, you can really see how assumptions and understandings of success, excellence, worthiness, and goodness have been linked to the values, appearance, and practices of white people with wealth and power. They are playing the tune, and society dances. So, what if we change or ignore the tune? Some of the hardest work we can do is in our own selves. To let go of our judgments of how we do and do not measure up to external standards of perfection, and instead to measure our actions against our values, honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Each and every person experiences brokenness, and we are all imperfect. The cup and all of us are already broken, and we are also still whole. What could it mean to be perfect? To be our whole, patched up, cracked, loving selves? And to work toward a more just society that embraces trying and failing, vulnerability, imperfection, growth, and compassion. What could it mean to be perfect in that world? May we find it. May it be so, and amen.